How do you even start this one without sounding dramatic? But if you've been watching NASCAR closely lately, you've probably felt it too. Something just feels off, like we're witnessing a shift that nobody really prepared for. And at the same time, there's this growing tension in the garage, not just about performance, but about the future. Big decisions are coming. Careers might be turning corners. And honestly, it's starting to feel like one of those moments we're going to look back on later and say, yeah, that's when everything changed. Because today, we've got not just one, but two major stories that are shaking up the NASCAR world right now. And both of them are connected in a way that makes this whole situation even crazier. Trust me, what's going on here isn't just surprising. It's the kind of thing that makes you question what's next for one of the biggest names we've watched for years. So before we dive into it, real quick, if you're a real NASCAR fan like me, go ahead and hit that like button and consider subscribing. This channel is brand new. We're trying to hit 15,000 subscribers, and it's all about real talk, real reactions, and everything happening in NASCAR every single week. Alright, let's talk about it, because this first story is honestly something I never thought I'd be saying out loud as a NASCAR fan. We're talking about Kyle Busch. Yeah, that Kyle Busch, the two-time Cup Series champion, one of the most dominant drivers we've ever seen. The guy who made winning look routine for nearly 2 decades is now sitting on a 1-0-0 race winless streak. Let that sink in for a second. When Kyle Busch left Joe Gibbs Racing after the 2022 season and moved over to Richard Childress Racing to drive the number 8 Chevrolet, it honestly felt like a perfect reset. And early on, it looked like a genius move. He wins at Auto Club Speedway early in 2023, then gets his third win by early June, and suddenly Kyle Busch is right back in the championship conversation. At that point, it felt like we were watching a full comeback story. But since then, nothing. No wins through the rest of 2023, nothing in 2024, nothing in 2025, and now, 7 races into 2026, still nothing. That drought has now officially hit 100 races, the longest of his entire career. And to put that into perspective, his previous worst stretch was just 36 races between 2016 and 2017. This is a completely different level, and it's not just the wins. Through 7 races this season, Kyle Busch is sitting 24th in points, and his best finish is only 12th. Not a single top 8 finish yet. And that has never happened at this point in any of his previous 21 seasons, even during the rough years. That's how serious this drop-off is. And then you add in the bigger picture. His 9-year streak of winning at least one race every single season gone in 2024. Missed the playoffs in 2024 for the first time since 2012. Missed again in 2025. And now in 2026, he's not even looking close to being a contender right now. And here's where things start to get really interesting and honestly, a little uncomfortable. Kyle Busch is in a contract year with Richard Childress Racing. He turns 41 years old in May. Now the question isn't just, can he win again? It's will he even still be in the Cup Series in 2027? And look, we've seen drivers compete at a high level well into their 40s before, so age alone isn't the issue. The bigger problem is performance, and also the reality that Richard Childress Racing hasn't been on the same level as the top powerhouse teams for a while now, even before Kyle got there. So yeah, there's a real argument that maybe it's not just him, but at the same time, NASCAR doesn't wait for anyone. And with silly season shaping up to be way more chaotic this year, especially compared to 2025, when only 2 full-time rides changed, the situation is about to get very real. So now the big question becomes, is Kyle Busch really going to be stuck at 63 career wins, or is there still one more chapter left somewhere else? And honestly, we might start getting answers as soon as this weekend, because the next race is the Food City 500 at Bristol Motor Speedway, a track where Kyle Busch has won 8 times on the concrete. This is one of his places. If there's anywhere he can flip the script, it's Bristol. But man, the pressure right now is massive. Now let's move into the second part of this story, because this is where things get even more fascinating and honestly, a little bit wild. If Kyle Busch does leave Richard Childress Racing after 2026, where could he actually go? There are 5 real possibilities being talked about right now. First, staying right where he is at Richard Childress Racing. And yeah, based on everything we just talked about, that doesn't sound likely, but it's not completely off the table. There have been small bright spots even during this drought, and if they can find consistency, maybe Kyle decides to stick it out one more year. Still, it feels like a long shot. Second, Spire Motorsports. And this one honestly makes a lot of sense. They have Carson Hocevar locked into the number 77 Chevrolet long-term, but beyond that, nothing is really set in stone. Michael McDowell is also 41, and Daniel Suarez, who came over from Trackhouse Racing to replace Justin Haley, is basically in a prove-it situation after a career with just 2 wins across multiple top teams like Joe Gibbs Racing and Stuart Haas Racing. And here's the key connection. Kyle Busch sold Kyle Busch Motorsports to Spire after 2023, and he's already been running and winning races with them in the Truck Series. There's history there. There's chemistry there. And with his son, Brexton Busch, coming up through the ranks, this could be a long-term family play. Third option, and this one sounds crazy, but we've learned not to rule things out in NASCAR. Hendrick Motorsports. Yeah, that Hendrick Motorsports, the team owned by Rick Hendrick, where Kyle Busch actually started his Cup career over 20 years ago. Now look, this would depend heavily on what happens with Alex Bowman in the number 48 Chevrolet. Bowman has struggled, and he's also dealt with multiple health-related absences over the past few seasons. If Hendrick decides to make a change, could they go with a veteran instead of a young driver? Especially if they can't land someone like Connor Zilisch from Trackhouse Racing. And don't forget, HendrickCars.com has already been sponsoring Kyle Busch in the Truck Series with Spire. It's unlikely, but not impossible. Fourth, Legacy Motor Club. Now this one is interesting because of the Toyota connection. A return to Toyota with 23XI Racing, the team co-owned by Denny Hamlin, would have made a ton of sense, but that door looks closed. They're sticking with Riley Herbst in the number 35 for 2026, and Corey Heim is expected to take that seat in 2027. But Legacy Motor Club, backed by Toyota and led by Jimmy Johnson and Richard Petty, is planning to expand to 3 cars in 2027. So if Kyle can't reunite with Denny Hamlin, could he team up with 2 legends like Johnson and Petty instead? That's a storyline right there. And finally, the fifth option. Stepping away from the Cup Series entirely. Not retiring from racing completely because Kyle Busch has made it clear he still wants to win a Truck Series championship, but possibly shifting focus away from the Cup level. And if that happens, he would instantly be a title favorite in the Truck Series, especially with Spire Motorsports. But let's be real, that's probably not what most fans want to see. And honestly, it might not be what Kyle wants either, because despite everything, it still feels like there's something left in the tank. It's just a matter of whether he can find the right situation before time and the sport moves on. And that's really what this whole story comes down to. This isn't just about a winless streak. This is about the future of one of the greatest drivers of this generation. Is this the beginning of the end or just the setup for one last comeback? As a fan, I'm not ready to count Kyle Busch out yet, but I'd be lying if I said this didn't feel different. Now I want to hear from you. What do you think happens next? Does Kyle stay with Richard Childress Racing, find a new team like Spire Motorsports or Hendrick Motorsports, maybe even Legacy Motor Club, or do you think we're actually getting close to the end of his Cup career? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Let's talk about it. And if you enjoyed this kind of real, honest NASCAR conversation, go ahead and like the video and subscribe to NASCAR Nation Report. We're just getting started chasing that 15,000 subscriber goal and building a community of real fans who live and breathe this sport every single week.